Ashley, well, of course it is. And there's Ms. Brown. So good timing. Uh, Ashley, if you'd go ahead and call the roll, please.
Sure thing. David Smith,
Present.
Chair Tom Farrell,
Here.
Wallace Grainer,
Here.
Ryan Clinton,
Here.
Jeff Green,
Here.
and Brooke Brown.
Here.
There
That
we
is
go.
the strike force members that are here. We also have Amber Lewis, City Administrator, and Carrie Kaler, Director of Development Services.
Excellent. Thank everybody for coming. Next item I have is public comments. And this is citizens wish to speak on anything that's not on the agenda. Please, if you would signify, just let us raise your hand. And Ashley, you want to tell everybody how to do that, since I still don't know.
Sure. It doesn't look like we have anybody calling in, but on your screen down at the bottom near participants, either by clicking on participants or next to it, depending on your version of Zoom, you should have an option to click to raise your hand. And if I'm sure if you just unmuted and started talking, we'd listen to you also. So
Very good. And anytime on any of these issues, if any of the citizens want to have a comment, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we acknowledge that. And if I miss it, Ashley, if you can help me kind of see it. Sometimes I miss hands that go up on my little screen, but I'd appreciate if you'd help on that. Next items I have are the items 2 and 3, which is discussion possible action on the minutes from the May 24th meeting and from the June 7th meeting. And I was threatened earlier that I had to do this or something bad would happen to me. And I took that to heart. So here we have. So I've read it. I don't know if anybody's read it, but I would ask that we approve this. And if anybody has any corrections or additions that they would like to make, we will go back and redo those if we need to. So could I have a motion to accept the minutes on these 2 meetings we had?
I so move.
Thank you, Wally. And do we have a second?
I second.
And we have a second. And again, if you are opposed, just raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to assume we have a unanimous vote. And again, if there's any corrections after take a better look at them, we can go ahead and redo those on that. And so I'll call the questions and not seeing any hands. So that saves me from some fate worse than what I want to get. Item 4 is a working session with the Bee Cave Road Subcommittee, including discussion on the rear front and side setbacks, green belts, impervious cover, height restrictions, and other concerns on commercial properties. I'm going to just kind of start some of this off by saying, why don't we just kind of go through some of the things we've looked at, and let me start on the north side of Bee Caves Road. So I think, and anybody that doesn't agree with this, please raise your hand and we'll bring you into the discussion. But I think what we had discussed was no more than 2 stories on the north side of Bee Caves Road. And I'm not seeing any hands go up, so I'm guessing that that's what we kind of said. David?
So do we want to just reiterate no more than 2 stories? And I think current zoning is no more than 2 stories and no higher than 30 feet.
Okay, yeah.
Do we want to have belt and suspenders on that? I'm assuming that works for modern architecture and building design. I know residential is 35. I don't know, but I think if we're going to stay consistent with current zoning, it'd be 2 stories and 30 feet. But yeah. I'd be interested to hear what other folks have to think about that as well.
And I think that's good. The Wally, go ahead.
The only question I have, and I happen to be the example, I have a sloped lot that was cut and embankments were covered with stone or rock retaining wall. I have a building that currently is 3 stories tall, and it does not, it is the top of the ridge of the roof is below the floor level of the buildings immediately on timberline behind me. To limit that particular part of the property to 2 stories would be onerous.
Right.
In
So-
fact, actually, the current limitation, the builder that built the property, to meet the current limitation, was required to all throughout, he has a 9-foot ceiling in his offices, and the top floor of building D has an 8-foot ceiling, which is in today's market, not as marketable as 9 or 10-foot ceilings in an office. So I just point out that blanket type things like this, where we've got so many potential exceptions, I hate to see it set down in concrete.
The instructions that I received from city council was make sure it's not more than 2 stories. Now, the height is an interesting deal because we have so many of our properties in Rollingwood are on have topography issues. And so I met with, or I got with Kerry, and Kerry was kind enough to send me the ordinance in how we are now calculating height, the 30 feet, because of its, and Kerry, are you on here still? Yes, you are. Good. And correct me, Kerry, if I mistake this, because it was a fairly complicated deal. But in effect, what it said is to start your 30 feet, you're going to take 30 feet from the average of the natural grade of the building areas that you're building on. And it's a lot more complicated than that. I was really, the engineers obviously wrote our, how we calculate that. And I think that's correct, isn't it, Kerry?
Tom, I think she stepped away for a minute.
Oh, that's okay. But it was the average of, if you had a building 100 feet long, you took the average grade of that building and the average, and that's what you ended up starting your 30 feet at, Wally. Because you've got at least on your property line, you have at least a 30-foot elevational difference from one end of your property to the other, I would imagine.
Just about, you're right.
Yeah. So, that would make a difference as to, where the 30-foot came in on that.
The only question I have is you're limiting it to 2 stories, irregardless. I mean, I can build 2 15-foot high stories, but I cannot build the 3rd story at 10.
Right.
Do 3 10s with a roof line.
And I would tell you that one of the, and I understand that, but I think the instructions that, I won't say instructions, but one of the issues that I was told by the city council was, don't bring anything other than 2 stories because we probably won't vote for it. I think that was the way it was worded, and that's okay. We can do whatever we need to do, but I understand the issue that you have on that. Now, the current PUD ordinance has a 5-foot minimum, a 5-acre minimum PUD. And one of the things that I like about PUDs, and this is just me, is I'm not giving you zoning. I'm not approving a zoning on the property. I'm approving a project on the property that I know exactly what I'm getting. And that's always been a useful deal.
Tom, obviously on that one, I would love to see the ordinance modified to 4.5 acres for a PUD.
I think we lost Tom. I don't think he was shocked by what you said
Guessing that. And I think on the deal, and Brian?
I'm sorry, it looked like we
Right.
lost you there for a minute from my computer. I wasn't sure if you.
No, I
Did
hope I'm
everybody
still
hear
here,
my
but,
suggestion?
yes, or I did. So rather than focus on one piece of property right now, what I was trying to do with this is go through kind of where we'd looked at doing, and just bringing us up to date today so that we can start looking at individual properties, Wally. The other issue that I was asked to look at, or I chose to look at, was what is the city of Austin setback on commercial property that would be if one of our properties, residential properties, abutted a city of Austin commercial property. And the best answer I can give you, there's so many little caveats they have. It's just I can't get there. But the basic number is 5 feet on that as a rear setback. Now, currently, we do not have any side setbacks on our commercial properties, but we do have other restrictions that we don't have on any other properties in Rollingwood, one of which is a 50% impervious cover. And I believe that 50% was never designed to have anything to do with drainage when it was set up, because it's been that way forever. What it had to do with was the septic field that you required this is a carryover from back when we had septic, and or we did not want our buildings to be too bunched up. But without having side setbacks, it really doesn't make any sense to me. If it's a drainage issue, and we have drainage issues on BK's Road, unquestionably, my personal feeling is let the engineers deal with it and require that they have, and require that we have both water detention and water quality issues as we go forward that doesn't aggravate drainage issues downstream of any of our property owners. Not only Rollingwood property owners, but of course the City of Austin property owners on the other side of us. That's my feeling on that. And I will just turn this over, and what I'd like to do is start this discussion by just generalities, and then we can go to individual properties on that. So we have some kind of general framework that we're looking at on that.
Hey, Tom,
Yes, sir.
would it be possible for me to float the idea that I emailed you about?
Yes, I thought that was excellent, and I
Lost Tom again. Has everyone else lost Tom too?
No,
Oh, weird.
I can't hear him, Ryan.
Okay.
Tom, can you hear me? Tom? Oh,
Yep, we lost him.
oh, did you get my reply? I'm here.
Tom, you were gone there for about 45 seconds.
Yeah, let me. I'm utilizing my wife's art room, and my grandson and his friends are playing games, and I'm sure they're just using up all the bandwidth we have here. But
That's probably
okay.
what it is. So do you mind if I float this just to kind of put it out there?
No, I think I was going to ask Ryan, did you get my reply on that?
I think you said the only reply I got is yes, let's talk about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I wrote a few notes, but I'll go through those.
Sure.
Yes, please.
All right. So basically, I was concerned about trying to resolve the tension that we all are faced with the demand of the residents to protect their properties, and the also concern to make sure that property owners have a fair are fairly treated. the commercial property owner. So this is what I came up with as a potential way. And this also, I think, eliminates some of the need for us to create a different rule for every lot, which I began to be concerned with too, as far as whether that was even permitted. And we submitted some questions that I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get answered, but this was my attempt to resolve the concern that we had a different rule for every property. And then also an attempt to resolve the tension between the residents and the commercial property owners. And I think, some people will be happy with it. I think, it's very much a compromise. So nobody's going to love it is what my assumption is. But here's what my proposal was. Eliminate Bee Caves Road setbacks. So if you're on Bee Caves Road, we don't have a setback other than whatever is TxDOT has, right? So we don't have one as a city. It's whatever TxDOT has. 2, maintain the Rollingwood Drive setback for all lots as they currently exist. So, and I'll get to why that doesn't negatively affect that little triangle lot on the corner between Bee Caves Road and Rollingwood Drive in a minute. But so we maintain a single, I think it's 30 feet is what I think it was we talked about last time.
Yes.
Maintain that Rollingwood Drive setback. 3, if assuming that Wally is right, that a green belt eliminates the ability of a property owner to build even his own property, rebuild his own property on his own pad, then we eliminate that green belt setback entirely. 4, we eliminate the current 100-foot setback between, which as I understand it, is a setback that applies to commercial lots that border residential lots, and this will be replaced. So there still will be one. It's just not as currently exists. 5, and this is what the new kind of rule would be, is impose a 75-foot setback from the edge of a residentially owned lot to the edge of any new building construction on commercially zoned lots. So what this would do, you wouldn't get an advantage by having 2 little lots next to each other. Because currently, as I understand it, if you have 2 little commercial lots, each of which are within 100 feet of a residential lot, the little one on the outside wouldn't be affected by a setback, which doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't get a benefit from having a tiny lot. So that setback would be 75 feet from the edge of any residential lot. So whether you border a residential lot or not is irrelevant. It would just be a setback from the edge of a residential lot to any new commercial building. And that is, so by my calculation, we're giving, under that rule, we're giving people an additional 50 feet of footage we're giving them another 25 or 30 in the front. If they're on Bee Caves Road, we're giving them another 25 in the back as compared to the current 100-foot setbacks. 6, allow all commercially zoned lots on the north side of Bee Caves to build up to 2 stories in height and to permit retail and office use. Obviously, we want to prefer retail, but we can't make them do retail. So, I think that's what those current uses are. I didn't intend to eliminate any current usage. 7, maintain 50% impervious cover requirement on all commercially zoned lots. But again, there will be an exception that's meaningful for all of this. 8, allow all commercially zoned lot owners to rebuild their existing buildings in their existing buildings footprint without meeting either of the new 75-foot setback requirement or the 50% impervious cover requirement. So what that would allow is, that triangular lot that's on the corner that we can't figure out how to make any sense under the rules, that would allow them to rebuild on their current pad. It would allow Wally to rebuild on his current pad if the thing burned down. This proposal negatively affects me because it would give the strip mall behind my house more, the ability to build closer to my house than it currently is. And I imagine that that may make some people mad, and that might torpedo the whole thing. But what I was trying to do is create essentially a compromise that protected homeowners. But if you bought with a current building next to you that is within that 75 feet, I personally think it's fair for them to be able to rebuild in their current pads. Now, can they build some monstrous structure that's much, much bigger? No, because if you're going to do that, you need to stick to the setbacks. But if you want to rebuild under your current existing pad, then you wouldn't have to meet either the impervious cover to the extent you don't meet it now, or the new setback rules. So that was my proposal, and I thought it was at least a starting point for a way to get out of this trying to make up a rule for every individual lot. And I think it got us in my mind, it gets us to a fair place that protects people who bought a commercial lot from having it destroyed, their value destroyed, as Wally talked about earlier. So that's my proposal. And I'll stop talking now. Tom, you're muted.
I didn't mute myself, but I got muted anyway. Sorry. Ryan, it seems like to me, I mean, it was a lot of thought you put into it, and I appreciate what you were trying to do, because I think it's great thought process to go through, and I know you put a lot of effort in that. The basic deal that I look at is we've got to encourage people to redevelop that on areas that we don't like. There's some properties there that are creating some issues for our residential property, residential people, but we don't want to reproduce those, but we don't want to discourage people from redevelopment where it stays like it is forever. And the two things that I thought about on that were, one, and I think this impervious cover we need to spend a little more time on, because to me, I'm having a hard time. If it's a drainage issue, I would, none of the drainage on BK's Road other than Edge Grove affects the residential neighbors. And I don't want it to do that. I guess it could on South Crest if it got out of control, but so I would prefer that we look at the impervious cover issue, and then in most of these building deals, if we let them redevelop in their existing footprint with the existing height and whatever in there, it's really only about 3 buildings that's going to impact that I saw. And of course it does impact the one that's behind you. They do that. But the big one would be that corner area, which I think this really does work for the corner area. Excellent thought process on that. And I'm really okay with doing that, because that does have some, that has implications not only to us, but it's our entryway.
Can I ask a question? Hello?
Yeah, we lost Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll hold the question. It was a question to you, actually.
I'd be happy to, if that's all right. Do you guys want us to stop? Amber and Ashley, do you want us to stop?
No, go ahead.
The only question I have is that I've just physically walked from Edge Grove west there's the gas station, there's the building being remodeled, which I don't know how they can do anything with that other than what they're doing. They've got probably maximum use out of that. Then you've got two big store buildings. Then you've got a Goodyear store. I have no idea what the 100-foot or the 75-foot setback does to those people. And simply this, rather than a 75-foot setback, I would think 75 foot is better than the green belt by far. But I would think that you might want to say that the existing pad area could be redeveloped up to 2 stories with the current setbacks the building has today. That would make sense to me, as opposed to potentially going to the variance process because the man with the first multi-store building there west of Edgegrove decides he wants to modernize his building, wants to maybe do it 2 stories, and now he's looking at a 75-foot setback, and I've not seen any plot plans or anything else to tell me what that does to him. And until we know what it would do to him, I think it's foolish to come up with any kind of a setback definitive program.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to those particular lots that I think you're referring to on the west side of Edgegrove, those lots are the ones that back up to the city-owned lot.
Yes.
So the reason that I came up with the 75 feet from a residential lot is that it would actually give those guys a huge amount of building space because they're so far away from a residential lot.
Okay, so they will not be affected really by any change to what they have if they want to rebuild on that site plan. They could rebuild on it and not be affected with having to shrink their building.
Yeah, and regardless, my proposal included being able to build on your own pad, on the existing pad. So that would all be an exception to the 75-foot from a residential lot line.
Okay, that sounds fair. I didn't realize they all went back to the city-owned property. I thought that ended somewhere around the Goodyear store where it starts or something.
Yeah, it does end. I don't mean that they all have it, but the first few lots that are to the west of Edgegrove are backing up to. I mean, obviously, not every lot would get not every lot would be advantaged by changing it from 100 to 75. But some would, and all would be advantaged by being able to rebuild on their existing pad. And I'll tell you, I've already gotten flack from people about this, even just floating this idea of somebody said, no, when we put in the 100-foot setback, we meant it. We didn't want anything being rebuilt on any of those lots. We were happy with it being unbuildable. So
do they understand condemnation by the city that has to buy it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you continue to be allowed to rebuild in your existing pad,
Oh no,
it's probably not a taking.
It's not an inverse condemnation action at that point.
That's
it's
right.
only inverse condemnation if you can't redevelop, period.
If you make it,
does that.
If you essentially take away the private property, then it's you got some serious takings issues.
You got real problems, yes. No, if that is the case on most of those lots, then that's a good general statement. It still puts all of my buildings within the 75 feet. Obviously, I'd like to see something that says, with the exception if the top elevation of your building is equal to or below the floor level of the abutting residential lot. That's giving those residential lots a premium that you don't give any other residential lot in the city. You're telling anybody that if you want to apply it to all the lots in the city, nobody could build a 1-story building next door to a 2-story building, because he'd be encroaching on the use of the airspace. See, I've got all my buildings, my ridge line is actually below the level of the first floor of all of the timberline buildings behind me. So I'm not in any way encroaching on anything that they have or anything they would have if I were a residential lot built on stilts and wanted a 2-story home on stilts. I mean, I'm
Tom, you're
perfectly happy
muted.
to want to protect their view because I know that everybody was upset 35 years ago when this building was built. I just luckily wasn't involved in the construction or the permitting process because it had to be really dissension. But the result was that not one of those homes has had their view obstructed. In fact, almost all of them have huge tree lines at the back of their lot. They don't have any view because of the trees they've put in themselves.
Yeah, they, I mean, we have some of those owners on the call that I can see. And if y'all would like to make a comment on that, please feel free just to raise your hand and we'll make sure we call on you. And Ashley, if you see any, just let me know, please. Don't see any right now. So while it seems to me there's not yours is a different piece of property in my mind. I would prefer that one of the ways we do that is to say, go ahead with, and I'm okay with the way Ryan explained this, frankly, but have a provision for a reduction in the size for a PUD where you would bring back a building plan, a concept plan for the whole property. And that would be something that would be looked at by the city. That seems to me to be a better way for both the owner and the city to know what they're getting. And for let you guys be able to know what y'all can do with it. Wally?
I endorse reducing the PUD dimensions to 4.5 acres, and then it will be the same thing. You go back to the drawing board, just like you did on the Del Amo tract, and you go into it and you see what works based on the elevations that exist on the property, as opposed to making a generalized statement across the board.
Yeah, my preference would be to allow PUDs even smaller than the 4.5 acres.
Fine with me.
I think they
It's a
are
wise
very
move.
useful. It's a very useful tool for the city. Brooke?
Tom, when you say that, do you mean that if you qualify for a PUD, there's no setback or height limitations that apply at all for the protection of
They
the
are, PUDs are, well, you can still have the limitations, but PUDs are basically, they bring a building plan in, and it's, the city is going to approve a absolute building plan, not a zoning that meets the zoning code. Now,
Well,
it could be taller, it could be, you could, but I would trust our city not to exceed those things unless there was a reason to do it based on topography or something. I think if we had, as far as I'm concerned, you don't want to have a commercial property. I mean, our survey was very strong in that they didn't want our commercial properties to impact our residential properties. And we've tried to do that all our history of Rollingwood. And I'd like for us to continue to do it. But there is possibility, and you're correct, that if I brought in a PUD that came in and it exceeded the stated height, they can approve it. Of course, they can give a variance to the height restriction anyway, if they wanted to. There's not a lot of difference that they have on there. Does that make, did I say that correctly?
Well, I think where I see a difference is that a developer would come in with a plan that, for example, would have 3 stories.
Yeah.
Which would not be, and then the homeowners are in the position of feeling like we've got to be the ones that fight this plan.
Yeah, and that is absolutely, and that's something that's a negative, and I agree with that. The other side of that coin, Brooke, is if somebody brought in a 3-story building, let's say we had a 2-story limitation, and they brought in a 3-story building and requested a variance, they still, the city could grant that variance.
But
Now,
the developer would have the burden of getting that variance approved. One other thing I wanted to say, Tom, is that, if we're looking at Follies Track, it's one of the largest tracks
yes,
still there. And so I think there would be concern from the community that if that track were to be exempted, so to speak, from the kind of limitations we're trying to balance here,
yeah.
I think that would be a problem.
It would be, and I agree with everything you said, Brooke. I looked at this from the standpoint of, I've got 2 goals. One is to protect, and I think Ryan did an excellent job of this, to protect our residential neighbors, and they are our neighbors. And number 2 is, though, I want to encourage redevelopment that's no worse than what's there now. Let me
Right.
put it that way. And so, if there is a 3-story building there now, I'm not suggesting that I want a 3-story building there, but I'm saying if it came back and it met the requirement of our neighbors and a city council, then they could grant that anyway. They don't have to have, we don't have to have a PUD. We don't have to have anything. They can get a variance for that. And you're right. That's a very good point, that would be ominous on the developer rather than residents to fight that. And I think that's a good point. And I have to rethink what I think you made a pretty good point there, because that's not, we don't want to make it any worse on our neighbors than there, but we want to encourage the redevelopment to make it better for our neighbors. That's what we have there. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think Ryan's proposal does that.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you can attach requirements with what would otherwise be a PUD authorization. For example, you can't have a caveat that you can't propose a PUD that raises the height of the building.
You can't, that's right.
Beyond what it is currently. Something that would ensure that the things that people are worried about would be less likely to happen.
And I think that would be a very good recommendation that we do. My only reason that I like PUDs is I'm very concerned that when we zone property, any city zones property, we really don't know what we're going to get, because if they meet the building code and it's zoned properly, it gets built. And so what I liked about PUDs was, when we approve a PUD, we know exactly what we're going to get, because that's the agreement. It's a written PUD agreement, a written agreement between the parties as to what you're going to get. And I always kind of like that rather than open zoning. But you're right about one thing. You're right about a lot of things. Don't be wrong, but you're right about that. Could put the onus on the neighborhood as opposed to the developer on that. And I've always, I hope I'm right, that our city government has always been very responsive to our residents and make sure that their interest is protected. And as long as that's done, then I don't worry about that. But your point is well taken on that. I'll have to think about how that would work. But I do like the idea of not, if we do allow a smaller PUD, that we put some restrictions on it by height and other items that we might have, setbacks and that sort of thing. I think we could do that.
Tom, you have some hands up. I just want to let you know in case you hadn't seen.
Oh, no, I either have to put my glasses on or not. And if I do, I have to set back far enough that can't hardly see y'all. So who has their hands up, Ashley?
Elizabeth Day.
Elizabeth? Sorry.
Hi, is the audio working? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I live at 4 Westgate Circle, and after Wally spoke, hello, Wally.
I,
I walked next door to 2 Westgate Circle that backs up the most directly to your property. And I believe when you said that the ridge line is equal to the first finished floor level of that house, I believe you must have been referring to the eave line, because there is an 8-foot fence in the backyard and I can see 4 feet of your roof above that. So I believe you were referring to the eave line.
Maybe. I don't know.
And I guess that's important, because if you maintain the height of that building and decided to put, or anyone decided to put a flat roof on it, the exposure to the resident would be greatly increased. And
Thank you.
that's all.
And let's see, David, I'm sorry. So you got your hand up.
So, couple thoughts. One of the things I want to kind of compare notes with you, Tom, and Ryan on this as it relates to Brian's proposal. I agree with the concept of reducing the setback from the TxDOT right away on Bee Caves Road in order to help encourage development closer to Bee Caves Road. But one of the things that I have a little bit of concern about completely eliminating it is whether or not we would have the ability to put utilities in the TxDOT right of way versus reserving, even if it's 5 feet of front setback on those properties for utility work.
This is why it's good that you're on the commission, David. Good point.
Well, I know, and it's kind of asking a question as much as anything else, because I know, for, both because of the creek runs back there, as well as you have homeowners back there, I sure would rather have utility work happening along Bee Caves Road as opposed in the front of those properties as opposed to behind. So, I mean, that's a thought. I mean, it's and that's a little bit of an engineering question about, whether 5 feet of a setback is enough or not, whether or not we have any right of putting utilities in the TxDOT right of way, et cetera. And so that's kind of more of a open question. And Tom, I really like your thought of reducing the size, the acreage size on the PUDs. The thing about PUDs is, whenever you're doing a PUD, basically you're starting with the restrictions as a baseline. From a governmental perspective, you're saying, okay, well, here's what zoning is. And basically, when you're doing a PUD, the developer, at least in my mind, has to come in and say, well, here's why, what I'm saying doesn't fit exactly into your box, but here's, why y'all are going to end up as a community liking it more. And the thing about, from a business side, PUDs is there's also an economy of scale. And I can really only think of one, maybe two kind of properties that are smaller than 4.5 acres that would even potentially lend itself to a PUD just because of the expense of doing a PUD. So when you have, when a developer is doing a PUD, you have engineers, architects, attorneys. You have a lot of people working on this, and it's expensive and more time consuming than just staying in the, the zoning restriction box. But it allows for more flexibility and creativity. The other thing is it allows for is more customization. And Tom, this from doing the PUD on the Endeavor project. I mean, you can design, you can be a lot more controlling of, okay, design elements, elevations, split elevations, materials, et cetera, than you can if they chose to kind of go to the box. And so, there's some trade-offs back and forth in terms of, everything else. So I think, I think there's a lot of smaller properties that just because of the economics of doing PUDs would, it would never work economically. And also, it's the thing that differs from a PUD as opposed to going in and getting a variance request. From a variance, say if you wanted and I know everyone's concerned about height, and I get that. If you're going in and looking for a height variance, all you're doing is going in and say, well, I want a height variance. And that's the only thing that council's looking at. Say you go in and said, okay, I can't comply with the 30 feet. Will you give me 35? Or I want 3 stories here because I don't think it's going to conflict. But the thing about negotiating a PUD is, as a community and as also, a city government, the council can say, okay, well, yeah, developer, we see your, we see your point in terms of going from, 30 to 35 feet or from 2 stories to 3 stories. Yeah, we've kind of, been convinced that it's not going to cause visual impacts or physical impacts to residents. But in order to do that, we want to negotiate these other things about your property in terms of materials, everything else. And that's kind of the nice thing about PUDs. But I think we can look at what some of the sizes of the properties are, but, I think it's more of a case of kind of, reducing the PUD size from, I think it's 4.5 acres now to maybe, 2.5 acres, as opposed to just doing away with it or reducing it further than that. And those were really my only thoughts.
Well, my feeling on the PUDs is the advantage is I agree with what you said, David, but there's another advantage in that it encourages people to accumulate larger properties we have a larger planning process that we can go through. I want to make sure that we cover Brooke's issues about making sure that it's a level playing field. Let's call it that, Brooke, from a standpoint of that, because I think that's a valid point. I'm trying to keep that in mind. But one of the thoughts that, and Ryan, I apologize, I can't tell whether I sent that or not. I thought I did. But one of the thoughts I was going to encourage us to have a discussion on was having a flexible rear setback line versus the impervious cover, i.e., if you came back further from the rear setback line, that you would have less impervious cover that you had to deal with on that, because that would give people more of a room to operate on. I thought that would an incentive to operate.
So something like, let's say that this is just a proposal, right? But
yeah,
let's say that we did the 75 feet from the closest residential lot. You're saying that if you could say, but if you stayed 100 feet from the closest residential lot, you might be able to go down to a 40 or a 60% impervious or whatever. I'm probably getting the numbers mixed up, but it's currently at 50% impervious cover. You could go down to 40% impervious cover if you were 100 feet away from.
And maybe even give it to that amount. I mean, give it a better opportunity. Encourage people to say you can build more footage if you can't build any higher, but you can build more footage if you come back further from our commercial or residential areas. Does that make sense?
I don't mind that idea. That doesn't seem crazy to me. One thing I would just like to say about PUDs is that I feel like my job on this commission is to help solidify the neighborhood's vision as best we can for the future. And I feel like reducing the PUD requirements just drives a giant truck size loophole into all of the work that we've done. So I'm going to personally oppose reducing the PUD requirements for that reason, but I understand why. I mean, everything that David said made absolute perfect sense. And I don't disagree with a word he said. I'm deeply uncomfortable with the neighborhood doing so much work and getting together. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, even after we all agree to what we think.
Yeah.
It's then going to go before, we're going to circulate a draft to another town hall, and hopefully people will actually see it in person, in how that would impact their properties. And then it's going to have to go to city council, and I assume it's also going to have to go to P&Z. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I just hate the idea of doing all of that work and then having someone be able to just come in and say, yeah, I know you guys did all that, but I really want 3 stories. And so I'm going to propose a PUD, and then me and my neighbors have to yet again face the question of, do we sell our houses or do we go fight again? And that's my wife said we are listing our house when this first happened. And something I don't talk about much was that the reason that I got involved in all of this is because a 6-story building was proposed behind my house, and the amount of stress that it caused our family and our neighbors' families is immense. And I really like the idea of reducing the blood pressure in the neighborhood and reducing the anxiety in the neighborhood, to get us down to a level where we all kind of feel comfortable. Okay, everybody's going to be safe. Your investment's safe, and we can kind of move forward with. Did everybody get what they wanted? No. I mean, my proposal doesn't get me everything that I would have wanted, or I'm sure that the property owners next to me would want. And I know that I've already gotten calls from people saying this is a crazy idea. We don't want anything on Bee Caves Road. But that's to me is like, I really want us to be able to come up with a consensus where we feel comfortable that our investments are safe and we can lower the temperature and lower the anxiety in the community. I certainly don't want to have to face a battle with the developer behind my house saying, okay, I'll come back with a 4-story PUD proposal or a 3-story PUD proposal. And then we got to fight all over again or move. And I just really don't want to do that.
And that's understandable. And I think that's, and we don't want to put, as Brooke said, I don't want to put our residents in a position. Ryan, I guess the good part is you're very capable of fighting that. Some of our residents wouldn't have quite the tenacity or the ability to do all of that. So, and that's, we got to protect them 100% too. I mean, that's our job to do that. So let me give some thought how we do that. What I thought was, I thought Brooke's suggestion that if we suggest that we amend the PUD deal, that we put some caveats on it, says, okay, you can have a smaller PUD, but you're not going to go, it's not going to be involving the height or the setback without, some kind of consequences that you have on there. And
we could also potentially have it so that essentially the adjacent neighbors had to sign off on it. Like, but you don't get it unless the neighbors agree.
It gets to be tougher to do that, but now what we could recommend is a PUD would require a supermajority of the city council votes.
Or unanimous.
Yeah, I think state law does makes you. I don't think there's a funny thing about some of that, as I recall, and it's been a long time since I looked at it. Brooke, you might remember better than I do, but it seems like to me there was something in the local government code that said you can't make it unanimous, but you can make it supermajority, and that may have been changed over the last 20 years. Seems like it was something along that line.
Nothing comes to mind, but I can take a look at it.
Yeah, that seems to me there was something, because we have certain provisions even in Rollingwood code that when we passed it, we required a supermajority vote. And you're going to ask me what that is. And
no, I know there was one with the, when the police station was proposed. I know that there was a provision that got triggered because a certain number of neighbors within 500 feet signed in opposition, and that triggered the need for a supermajority. Because we are I forgot the name of it, but because we are a tiny city,
charter.
We essentially can't have a charter. And so we can't have a constitution, which means that the city council can change the law at any moment.
Yeah,
No city council is locked into what a previous city council decided.
yeah,
So, even that can change overnight. They can eliminate the need for a supermajority if they want to,
Yeah.
which is why I just like the idea of having something stable, clear. Everybody is upfront about the rules.
yeah. And I don't object to that. And like I said, if somebody wants to, and nothing in the world prevents a developer who says, look, I've got this brilliant plan for this 2-acre tract of land, and it'll need 4 variances, or I can come in and request a PUD, and you have to amend the PUD ordinance to do all that to let me do it. And here's my plan. And the city council can look at it and go, yeah, okay, this is great. We'd love to do it. But it's a big process to go through, and it should be, because anything we develop is not something that goes away in a couple of years. It's there for forever on that. So, David, I'm sorry, you've got your hand up.
No,
David, I've got you muted. Maybe it's me, but
okay, I'm good. Thank you. Just kind of from my point of clarification, and just because I think I'm a little bit behind on it. So I know at one point there was there's been some talk or some proposals for redevelopment of the Chinatown Center that you referenced, right? Was there actually proposal from the owner of the center to build a 6-story building on there?
Yeah, I have the plans.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I didn't realize that. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, because I didn't realize that.
It was never official, it was never
never filed, but
yeah, it was never filed with the city, but it was circulated, and there architectural drawings and plans.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so I didn't realize. I know that kind of, there was kind of in I think one of the original kind of surveys or proposals, kind of a range of options that would include kind of higher stories, but that's interesting, and I that's why I asked, because I had not heard that, but it's helpful to know about that. So thanks.
so if we, if y'all don't mind, can we address the impervious cover things? Why, what are the reasons that we want to maintain impervious cover? Of course, one would be, and I'm just thinking out loud, one would be for our drainage issues. And 2 would be for aesthetics of how properties would look on BK's Road. But we do not have a side setback. So, that really is not going to limit the aesthetics the way my look. So it gets down to, I tried to go back and look when this was done and what it was designed for. And I'll be honest, it predates our ability to figure out why this was there when it was done. Because the impervious cover ordinance gives you the right to exceed the 50% if you put in certain things like paving stones, and there are some issues that you could exceed 50% if you wanted to. So I couldn't tell if it was designed for drainage or for septic systems. Brooke?
What I've heard, and I'm not an expert in this area, is that impervious cover in terms of water management has 2 consequences. One, if an area has an impervious cover, then the water that falls through rainfall does not go into the aquifer, the underlying aquifer. For example, with ever expanding roofs, we now have ever expanding water going through our drainage system
Yes.
and not the aquifer. So that's one issue. Then the other issue is that you don't know what to design your drainage system to do, because if you reduce impervious, if you currently say there's a 50% impervious cover requirement, then that means 50% of the remaining area of the lot can have 50% of the lot can have an impervious cover, but no more. And you can design that. If you say there's no impervious cover requirement, then you have to design as if 100% of the lot would be covered by impervious cover if you want your design to work.
Oh,
So those are the two things I've heard in terms of managing water. The other thing that I understand is that because you have if you have an impervious cover requirement, you necessarily leave that percentage of the property that can't be covered in the situation where it's green and it's going to be landscaped and there are going to be trees.
good.
Or maybe poor landscaping, but at least there's the hope that there's green space there that's attractive. And I think when we talk about, I would like to include discussion as we reduce setbacks and reduce impervious cover, that we ensure that there's going to be green space around these buildings, and we ensure that they're going to be, we've protected heritage trees, and we've, the current tree ordinance, rolling wood tree ordinance, doesn't apply to commercial property.
Yeah.
So if we eliminate impervious cover, then if we don't have a tree or landscaping requirements, then you could build concrete wall to wall. So that's the concern I think I have in, the survey showed that our community likes the green area. They want more shaded walking area. Part of the problem to walk to Chinatown on Bee Caves Road is there's no shade for long stretches of that property. There's no shade to walk from Chinatown up to the Endeavor Center. So if we want to encourage walking to these commercial properties, then we've got to think about the trees and the landscaping that goes along with developing the property.
One of the issues we had with those tree deals there is on that area of the walking on Bee Caves Road, the sidewalks, Brooke.
Right.
TxDOT still has about 20 or 30 feet of right of way on the other side of the sidewalk.
Right.
I
I saw what they did to Bee Caves Road in Westlake with trees.
Yeah.
We don't have authority to deal with that, but what we do have authority to deal with, I think we should give attention to.
Okay. And I think the survey did come back. Green space was incredibly important. And, that was one of the things that I thought about is, okay, so if we are, one of the ways that we looked at Rollingwood Town Center was allowing them to have higher height, no greater square footage than they could get, but allow them to have taller buildings, and they pushed them away from the residential areas. That was the compromise that came about. It wasn't any more square footage, but the residents there, were involved in the discussion, and we came back with that kind of proposal that seemed to work on that. So it's been going on for a long time. David, I'm sorry, you've got your hand up, and you may have had it up for a long time.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to, and so water quality and that's kind of part of what I do, or a lot of what I do professionally. And, the thing about, I'll say kind of what Brooke said, on larger landscapes is generally true in terms of, basically when you look out the hill country over larger landscapes, rainfall percolates in through recharge features. Under the TCQ Edwards rules, basically the only way for aquifer recharge to happen on a site is for there to be a recharge feature, i.e. a cave or some other conduit to allow or to facilitate rainwater to recharge into the aquifer. So basically, to the extent that there were any or are any recharge features on U.S. commercial tracks, the TCQS setbacks, et cetera, all of that's been developed for so long that probably isn't the case. One of the big barriers to redevelopment along Bee Caves Road, and then I didn't quite follow kind of the second water quality point Brooke made, but to the extent we have setbacks, those setbacks are going to have to be, particularly the back setback, it isn't going to be paved or developed. But one of the biggest barriers we have to redevelopment of any properties is, just talking to developers, is the impervious cover issue is going to be particularly when you talk about height restrictions, if you don't want people to go up, you're going to have to kind of spread, and you're going to have to do two things. You're going to have the square footage that's going to make redevelopment economically feasible, but then you also have to park according to at least existing code. And I mean, I know, at some point in the future, we may be able to reduce the need for parking, et cetera, through, ride shares, alternative transportation, et cetera. But at least as it stands now, we have to comply with current code in terms of parking. So, the only way to get those two things is by reducing that. The other thing is, as Bee Caves Road becomes busier and busier and busier, based on traffic and everything else from an urban standpoint, streets that appear to be narrower, traffic is going to move slower than streets that appear to be a green belt. Kind of green space and trees to me is a premium, and a premium particularly on the backsides of properties where we're talking about keeping setbacks for two things, to basically buffer against current residences and provide green space to current residences. But, I think the incentive for developers, especially if we do away with the front setback, is they're going to want to make the front of their establishment look attractive to people who are prospective tenants, shoppers, et cetera. And so they're going to want the front of their buildings to look nice. The backside of the buildings, that's what, setbacks with setback, floodplain, et cetera. So I really think, and also, two things. One, from a drainage standpoint, they have to, comply with the city's drainage plans and talk to the city's engineer in terms of just the amount of water coming off. The second thing is they have to comply with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's Edwards Aquifer rules, which means that they're going to have to be protective of water quality for purposes of, recharge and the aquifer itself. And so because those standards apply, and because you have to have the standards apply, I feel like we are really hamstringing development by trying to keep a 50% impervious cover, which is a extremely low impervious cover if you're talking about a redevelopment scenario. And I think we're kind of hamstringing redevelopment, and I think we're almost kind of forcing the hands of current property owners just to basically write out properties as long as they can, because it's not really economically feasible to then go and redevelop with that onerous of a impervious cover limitation, particularly when you're looking at some of the existing properties being, 70 or 80% impervious cover today. And on a redevelopment scenario, even if they're redeveloped at 70 or 80% impervious cover, given the TCEQ rules, you're going to have a vast improvement of water quality anyways, because of that the need to comply with those newer environmental water quality regulations.
It would seem to me that I'm not sure. Brooke, when you talk to people about it, and I tried to track down some of the people that did this back in the day, and I wasn't successful, but I couldn't figure out why we came up. The 50% sounded fairly arbitrary when we did, but it did allow you to go up to, I believe, 75% impervious cover if you did certain things. And that this was on a bunch of old rules on that. So, but I looked at this and I was trying to figure out why we came up with 50. That's really what I was trying to do.
I have not asked that question. Why is it currently 50?
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily set on maintaining the 50%, but I am set on ensuring that as we reduce a impervious cover requirement, we have other conditions that ensure that there is green space, and that the current tree ordinance doesn't apply to commercial properties.
Yeah.
And maybe Carrie can answer this, whether the drainage requirements in the current zoning code apply to commercial properties. I'm not sure the city's drainage requirements apply, but that's one question I had.
And I can, Carrie, are you on here? I think I asked that before, Brooke. You're going to ask me what answer I got, and I can't recall. But Carrie, are you on here yet?
Hey, Tom, I am on here, and
Okay.
I can't I'll have to look at the drainage specifics as to
Okay.
which portions apply to commercial and what applies to residential. I believe it applies.
That would
And
be
certainly there's really specific state regulations regarding drainage. But I believe it applies, but I don't want to speak out of turn, and I'll have to go back and research it and see if there's any nuance to it.
Yeah. Now we not only have to apply on drainage and detention to the state rules, but we have to the Barton Creek Edwards Aquifer Conservation District, because we are part of that, and that does have some fairly strict rules that we have to adhere to. I see that Dinah Wallace has got her hand up. Dinah.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for recognizing me. Am I coming through?
Yes, ma'am. You sure are.
All right.
Go ahead, Dinah.
I'm going to speak from a very personal a blip when this happened. I'm at 5006 Timberline Drive. My grandparents were in their 80s. That was their home. And I was with them that morning when the bulldozers showed up 12 feet on the other side of their fence and started mowing down the trees and excavating the hill. The discussion that there was that you can only imagine the dissension that occurred before. Oddly enough, there was no dissension because no one told us. It was a complete and total surprise. Now that was done with restrictions and standards and limitations and totally violated code and broke all the rules, but they did it anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to discuss situations. I'm willing to compromise. I thought Ryan did a very good presentation. I have some issues with it. That's understandable. But I think without a doubt, the onus should be on the developer. Bee Caves is a highly desirable location. Rolling Wood is a highly desirable place to live. And I think restrictions need to be in place. They need to be preserved because history has taught us this is what happens even when they are in place. So the idea of loosening them up and making things easier beyond a certain degree, and again, that's the subject for compromise and discussion, is a foolish path to go down because history has taught us they're not going to follow the rules, or maybe the new breed will, but at any rate, they have not in the past. And rules need to be
And I kind of
place. They were in place at the time. It didn't help. We need to have rules.
I guess we lost Diana.
I'm done. Thanks.
Does Tom know we've lost him?
Lost everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, it looks like he's dropped off completely. Oh, there he is.
I'm back.
Wally, Wally, are you on here?
yes,
When was your property developed?
1983, 84, 85. It was about a 3-year project, if I recall.
Yeah.
At the time, I did have an office on Bee Cave, so I was driving past it, and it was quite a job.
Diana, as I recall, back in those early 80s, we had 2 projects that were very closely, that came along very closely together, both of which exceeded our regulations at that time. One was across the street on the south side of Bee Caves Road, and one was on the north side there. And I do recall the issues that went on with that. I know on the north side, south side of Bee Caves Road, it took several years to resolve that. I will tell you that the city is a lot stricter from enforcement than it was back in the early 80s. I think that was unfortunate, but that did happen back in the early 80s, I know. And I do remember our neighbors there at Westgate Circle, that what they were going through in Timberline when that all occurred. So anyway, let's see. I want to make sure that what my intention is not so much is to diminish these but regulations. We've got to keep those in place to ensure that not only Rollingwood gets something that we're proud of, but that it doesn't affect our neighbors any more than what they've got. They're affected by the commercial area right now. And my comments on the impervious cover is if we can trade off some of that for the height and for the limitation, and to have a better product on Bee Caves Road, not only for the city, but for our residents that abut that area anyway. So that's what I would like to look at, that we start to do. But I thought Ryan's proposals were good. The only two issues, I'm going to try to go back what I had looked at originally on this. Ryan, I think what David was talking about on the PUD, the other issue we would have is if we would, my thought is you eliminate the front setbacks that we have in regard to Bee Cave Road frontage where we have improved Bee Caves Road. The area we haven't improved Bee Cave Road on, I would suggest we not do that because it may be, we may end up having to acquire it, and it might be a little more interesting to try to do that. I don't know if that made sense or not.
Yeah, I mean, in those issues and the ones that David, I mean,
Yes.
you're both right. I mean, obviously, mine was more of like in floating an intent, not
Well, I think
necessarily
you-
understanding the specifics of planning that you guys know more about than I do.
Yeah, and I'm listen. I thought this was a wonderful deal. I mean, we can all say, "Gee, I wish it was this way," but you were trying to you were trying to do the right thing. That's all I could say, and I appreciate what you were doing on that. Now, this pertains mostly to our north side. On the south side, I am still.
Hey, Tom,
Yes, sir.
I think Wally was trying to raise his hand and ask something. What?
I'm sorry, Wally.
Oh, no, just in talking about the impervious cover, got to recognize when you talk about building a store, and you build it 2 stores, 5,000 square feet each, 10,000 square feet, you have to provide, if you're going to have businessmen with retail stores that are going to succeed, you're looking at a parking lot that's going to have 6 to 10 car parking for every 1,000 square feet. So you're looking at a parking lot, at least 60 cars. And then you're talking impervious cover, that's all impervious cover, plus the 10,000 square foot of concrete he's going to pour for his building. And then you have a 50% impervious cover. You've reached it ceases being economic.
Yeah,
You can't do it.
We do want to make it economical to redo, provided that it's not going to be harmful to our residents, and it's something that the city residents want. I would suggest this on the impervious cover. So let's, the big issues in this whole area has been like the city of Austin put in an impervious cover limitation as low as, I believe, 15 or 20% on areas that impact Barton Creek. Specifically, we don't impact Barton Creek. So I tried to look at, okay, City of Austin has done a lot of research on this. So what would be a reasonable number that they might have on other areas? Again, the City of Austin's code gets so complicated, I can't figure it out. So, but it generally is between 25 and 40% where that they want to keep as open area. So it's somewhere between 60 and 75% that they allow the impervious cover on, unless you are downtown, in which case it's 100%.
Or in certain corridors.
Or in certain
corridors. Yeah, because they've picked out some corridors for kind of their new urbanism design and planning, along Riverside, along, I think south of Mars, one of them, I think. But there's a few different corridors that is kind of the new urban design standard that they allow higher impervious covers for some other trade-offs.
And another reason that I thought that we should look at the impervious cover limitation, whether we remove it or lower it, was when this was put in place, you did not have the water quality issues and requirements that you currently have.
Earlier, your feet went up the stairs behind me.
Pardon?
That's okay. I was just trying to protect your privacy.
Right now, we have 10 years ago, you could do 50% impervious cover, and that would be your water quality issues. Today, you may have 50% impervious cover, but you still have to do the Barton Creek Edwards Aquifer requirements of water quality and then our drainage criteria manual requirements. So we put additional issues on, but kept our impervious cover at the same. If I had to just take a stab at it, I would say that we make sure that we keep our water quality. We make sure we keep our detention policies we have we make sure that we require the engineers to deal with that. We keep our green space requirements, but we can reduce our impervious cover some. And if I had to just pick a number, just say instead of 50%, 75% impervious cover, if you added those other requirements to it. And part of that requirement might be a green space that is that's added that would separate you from the residential areas on that. It's just a thought. I don't have that. But going back to the south side, I would like to see us remove the back on that to put it to City of Austin standards and make that 5%. Other than that, Ryan, I think all your other requirements, all the other things you suggested, I thought were excellent. That would reach. I think it would. There's some little caveats. I think from a development standpoint, we probably ought to change, i.e., that front setback issues, but also the redesign of the building. If Wally wanted to rebuild what he had, for example, but add some other space, because he could anyway today add some other building area, then that would be something that we'd like him to do the whole thing rather than just part of it. We don't want to encourage people to keep something there that's bad, that's not real useful for anybody to do that. I don't know if that made sense. It kind of wandered through my mind on that. But I do want to make sure that we encourage people to redevelop, provided it's in the criteria we want and it protects our neighbors back there. So that's kind of threading the needle. I thought you did an excellent job of giving everybody something, nobody 100%. So, which is, I guess, the art of compromise on that.
I did have one question. I think Wally mentioned it, and I saw David nodding his head. Is there any point in examining parking space requirements now? I've always thought of parking space requirements as an odd governmental regulation in the sense that it seems like the property owners would know how many spaces they need for the use that they want to build for, but maybe I'm just wrong about that. Do y'all have thoughts on that?
It bounces all over the place. And the City of Austin actually, which is, again, they kind of, a lot of people follow their criteria manual they encourage some areas, they will approve a commercial development without any parking requirements because they assume everybody's going to walk or ride a bike or ride a bus or Uber, which never happens, but they always think that. The only thing in Rollingwood that I have been not been very optimistic on when we did any development is never give a parking space to allow them to put more spaces in by making the spaces compact spaces. Because we just don't have, we have a lot of SUVs in the West Bank area. And they seem to take up a lot more space than we get out of a compact space. You can reduce that, and there are traffic engineers that will give you the required parking, and it's based on a manual, a national manual that doesn't have anything to do with what we have currently in our deal. But the national manual will tell you this is the use, this is the parking spaces that are required. And I absolutely agree. We need to update that to current standards on that. It changes all the time.
Would it
Yeah.
make sense then for us to adopt something that said the city should adopt as its parking restrictions, those adopted by the national manual?
Yeah, and I'll have to get the name of that. It's not, David, do you recall what that's?
No, I can't remember what the parking codes are, but I mean, yeah, so many of these like kind of code requirements follow the kind of natural industry experts and everything from parking to electric code to plumbing code, everything else. And, you know, you have these national organizations that do them and cities kind of adopt them wholesale, but then have the power to tweak them. You know, that's kind of the regulatory side of it. Also, you know, the flip side of that is, you know, a lot of perspective.
I've lost whoever's talking.
Right.
Same.
Sounds like we lost both Tom and David at the same time.
Tom, can you hear anybody?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
sorry about that. I disappeared. So a lot of these, you know, a lot of times you use a uniform code because you're building these spaces on spec, and you want to make sure that you're not artificially limiting, you know, what kind of, you know, what kind of tenant you'd be able to attract or not. So you tend to kind of go with the standard model, unless you're doing a purpose-built space where, you know, like I can think of a couple projects downtown where, like Tom said, that they didn't require any parking at all because, you know, you know, I think of a couple hotel properties who said, yeah, we're not going to do parking garage or any parking because, you know, we think in this new age that, you know, people are going to come downtown. They're going to come from, want to encourage people to come from the airport, not rent a car, et cetera. And, you know, I mean, there's exceptions to it that you can do through, you know, variance or PUDs too. But I mean, so much of that is based on kind of these generalized national standards.
And Ryan, there are some regulations you just have to adhere to, the ADA requirements. You have to have that. That's a federal law. But, you know, we've used, I think Rollingwood historically has used fairly good common sense. For instance, we've had the Rollingwood Town Center and Park Hills Baptist Church have a shared parking deal based on the different times that you have peak usage of those properties on that. And that encourages less concrete being built and more green area when you really look at it. That's the intent that you do. There are some economics involved, of course, but it's always better, in my opinion, to have less concrete if you can get away with it to make these work. The other thing when we're talking about parking lots is, and this is something that we encouraged on the Mara Vista development and all of those all the way over, is that you have shared driveways where you can go from one building to the next project without going out onto BK's Road. And I really want to make sure that we, that's something that I think that is something that we want to make sure that we encourage as we go through this. There are some topography issues on the north side of BK's Road that may prevent that. But I think that that's something we should do on that. The other things on the that we've got, and I'm just going to kind of go through the last things I have here. Ryan, I thought this was a good start. I'd like for us to look at we'll take care of the development part of that, the text dot and the PUD issues. I'd like us to consider maybe putting this at an area for impervious cover that might give a little higher impervious cover on that, but not exceed that. And if we do that we put the requirements on.
We've lost you again.
Requirements. One would be the tree ordinance for black.
Tom, you're cutting out on us.
While we wait for him, I don't know if Ashley or Amber could possibly answer this question. Is the impervious cover something that we could ask the city engineer to weigh in on as to whether there's a need for it, given that the city engineer does that with respect to the residential? I'm not sure anybody's listening.
Sure, yeah, we can ask them if they have maybe a best practice recommendation or what they've seen in other cities.
I think that would be helpful. To me, I don't know what the right answer is, and I hate to remove a protection without understanding the consequences of it. But if someone who knows way more than me would make that recommendation or have thoughts on it, that would be valuable to me if you guys don't mind.
Not a problem. I will see if they're willing to weigh in on that.
Well, for whatever it was worth, I gave you a rule of thumb, and I've been a developer since 1957. I've done shopping centers and I've done office buildings. And the only difference we've had in all those years is we've had the compact car concept, which is horribly abused because people put pickup truck full-size 150 Fords in them, and they're not anywhere near a compact car, and they end up taking a space and a half. But kind of the old rule of thumb was 4 to 4.5 cars for every 1,000 square foot of an office building, and roughly 6 to 7. And if you have a larger center, it goes up to 8 parking. If you look at the amount of parking at Barton Creek Mall, that's a huge parking facility, but it has to be because the square footage involved in each store. But those are kind of the rules of thumb that have been in the business and in city codes, from Los Angeles code, Orange County's code in California, to the codes down in the Rio Grande Valley, where I ended up building shopping centers down there. You do much less than those numbers and you find yourself with empty space because the people will not rent.
Elizabeth Day, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah. Yes, and this really does not have anything to do with the agenda this evening, but I would hope that somebody could look into the technological problems that we have with these Zoom meetings. We've had any number of audio difficulties tonight, and there are a couple of people I know that have no trouble with Zoom meetings on any other platform but the Rollingwood Zoom meetings. So I just wonder if there's some resource that we can call on to improve this experience.
Elizabeth, the only thing that I can think that it would be would be the cell phone signal or the, you know, the internet signal in Rollingwood. They, you know, they've just been this way. We tend to have, you know, a few technical difficulties here and there.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, Elizabeth, I would echo that. It's the cell phone service in Rollingwood, it is poor. I know that the Utility Commission has kind of made that priority to explore different options as to improving cellular service. Since we're a small market, private companies are kind of, I guess, reluctant, or it doesn't make financial sense to improve Rollingwood, but there are other avenues, such as the city being.
okay, so it's not anything that we're doing?
No, it's the
Does
local,
this
it's
have-
the
Does this have
infrastructure.
anything to do with the signal at City Hall? It shouldn't.
Well-
But there are some people who live in Rollingwood that have very successful Zoom meetings, except when they're on a Rollingwood Zoom meeting. So I don't think, yes.
Amber, this is Brooke. Are you hosting the platform on a cell network or on an internet network?
It's an internet network.
Okay, then that's a different network than cellular. So,
I think it's internet. I'm starting to get a little into the weeds, but I'm saying that it might be the individual's home that has, if y'all experience cell service troubles at your home, that might be contributing if you're experiencing tonight. And I agree, we haven't had much problem, except for tonight seems very poor. And time of day also, if there are a lot of folks using, I think Tom mentioned his grandkids were playing internet games. And so if they're on the, yeah.
Yeah, boot them off.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, it just, I can't analyze why somebody on Rollingwood Drive can have a successful Zoom meeting with 5 different Zoom customers or friends or whatever, but with Rollingwood, it doesn't work. So I have no suggestions. I would
Sure.
just be nice if it
And
worked better.
Are
So
those,
that's
sure,
all.
I understand your frustration. Are those meetings during the day when maybe not everyone's at home on the internet as much?
I don't know. It's not me. I haven't had any trouble myself. I use Spectrum and I'm on a desktop, but very often I just use my iPad and I don't have any trouble here, except, you know, for like the weeks that Spectrum goes down. But anyway, I think there are probably more important things to talk about, although, you know, the meetings are important. And when you can't hear what somebody's trying to say, I think that's a loss. So I will be quiet now.
Is there
Thank
any
you.
plan of when we will go face to face in a meeting room?
The city council is discussing that at their next meeting. There's been a request to do a hybrid scenario where some people can participate via their computer and that's going to take some technological upgrades and some decisions to be made around that by the council. But yeah, we are working on that.
Good.
Amber, I'm back. I'm on the phone. I got cut off by Zoom. So I don't know, did anybody else get cut off? Hello?
No, most of us
Hello.
are here. Most of us are still here.
Oh,
No,
okay.
but we were talking about technical problems.
Yeah. Well, I had one.
Before.
Well, let's. I don't want to interrupt if we were having a discussion on something else, but what I would like to do is, I would like to generally accept the Ryan's proposal because I thought it was an excellent one, with a couple of caveats. One, we work on the TxDOT PUE issue that we have to deal with, which I will work on with David. You had some comments, and I'll work with you on that. Two, I would like for us to look at the impervious cover, if we can do that without causing a problem, and have a couple caveats on that. One would be that we would have the both the Edwards Aquifer Conservation District requirements, and maybe even that we have a green space tree ordinance that would apply to the commercial properties too, which I think is important, and including the heritage. And then we look at the how that impact. I would like to look at how the impact that would be on the and all this pertains to the north side of BK's Road. So as a group, unless we have somebody that's adamantly opposed to it, I thought this was a good framework to start working on doing this, where we don't have to do specifics on each one of them. On the south side, the only caveat I had is I would like to match up the city of Austin rear setback with what we had, which is 5 feet. And that's the only other issues that I had on it. Did anybody have any other comments?
Only comment I have is I agree with endorsing Ryan's proposal as a good compromise. And I only have one suggestion on your impervious cover, is that you might want to have something involving planting trees through your parking lot, and every tree would be an equivalent of something in the impervious cover. The developer that did the Palisades, and I've since augmented it with 2 or 3 more trees, we're getting a pretty good shaded parking lot, which has got a lot of pluses for the way it looks as you drive by.
Wally, your trees in your parking lot, you may not remember this, but that was the first time I ever met you.
Yes.
Was when my daughter ran over one of your trees in your parking lot and drug it home, stuck in her car.
It's one of the trees I replaced.
Yes, I know, but yes, I don't know if you remembered the first time we met. That was it. I came over to talk to
I
you
vividly
about that.
recall.
Yeah, I do too. She drug the tree home along BK's Road, Rollingwood Drive, Park Hills Drive. She drug it home behind her truck. So.
Hey, Tom, this is Ryan. I just wanted to mention one thing that we discussed while you were gone. It's that we asked if maybe the city engineer could weigh in on the impervious cover. And Amber said that she would reach out and see if there was any insight there.
Excellent idea. I would also like to, and I will try to do this, is to reach out to the Barton Creek Edwards Aquifer Conservation District and get their input on that, because we are legally in that district and have to adhere to their rules too. So, but I will follow up on that. But Ryan, I want to compliment you. I think this was an excellent, I think I got everything down. And I think this is an excellent framework to work on this. So, any other comments that we have on this?
I haven't thought about how that would apply to the south side. So if anybody wants to think about that at all, I know you obviously want to make the change of changing the setback where a commercial property is adjacent to a city of Austin property, or better said, yes, a non-city of Rollingwood property. And you know, that I wouldn't have any significant issue with that. I have not thought about how this would apply to the south side at all.
I'm sorry, to what?
Sorry, I was just saying I have not thought through the consequences of my proposal for the south side of BK's.
Okay. This is just a framework to work on, and I think this is great. let me kind of move on a little bit because we're running out of time. We have two things that we need to try to finish up. Well, several things, obviously. One is on BK's Road. The other is we wanted to have, Brooke, you had requested that we have one meeting that we deal with the survey and the vision statement and the mission statement. From just a scheduling standpoint, and I intend to do that, from a scheduling standpoint, do we want to continue next Monday with the BK's Road and finish that up and then have the vision statement, or do we want to have the work on the vision statement next week and then finish up the BK's Road? Do y'all have a preference?
Tom, I would
Yes,
like,
ma'am.
before we finish up on BK's Road, that we address and review what the survey says about commercial property.
Okay, and that would be, then let's do this. Why don't I do this, Brooke? And I think this is a good idea. I appreciate that. Why don't I have that as our next Monday, and we deal with our vision statement at the same time to start that, and then we'll come back on BK's Road. Does that make sense?
Tom?
Yes, sir.
Was there a distribution to us, because I didn't get it, of the condensed responses to the commercial survey?
If you didn't, I'll make sure you do get it. I haven't seen it. Oh, I have seen it. So
Okay,
I know it's
I'd like to see a copy.
I'll get you one.
I believe the survey
Good.
results were in the packet last week, or the when we last reviewed the surveys.
We'll make sure you get one though, Wally.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So next week we will take up that, and then I will start working on the few things, the parts that I need to work on here. And the other thing I would like to do is some of the parts that we have, some of the other subcommittees we have, if we could get a summary of that and some of their information. Bowie has requested that we look at that. They start looking at that so they can help with some drafting on it, which I'll try to get them what we've got so far on that so they can go. Yes, ma'am.
I think I misspoke about the survey. I think we need to look at both what the residential survey said about commercial properties and what the commercial survey said.
Sure. Our commercial responses were very few, but we have some, and we can certainly address it. We'll deal with both of them because we looked at both of them when we did that.
Okay.
All right. So we will next week we will take up the survey questions, and I would like to start on our vision statement at that time too, Brooke, if that works. If that's all, it all works together to me anyway. I kind of view it as all one project on that. And then the week after that, we'll take up BK's Road and try to get that done. And Ryan, thank you again for your thoughts. I think this was excellent framework for us to go forward on that. Any other comments? Do we have any comments from any of our Strike Force members or for the public that would like to talk to us about anything? And I can't see them since I'm on the phone, but I'm not hearing any. So
Can anybody hear me?
yes.
Yeah, this is Elizabeth Day. I have a meeting packet with survey results that's 183 pages. Is that the correct survey packet? It does give the results. It's just large.
It is, and we actually have a summary of that we had Bowie do, Elizabeth, and Ashley, if you could you give Elizabeth a copy of that?
I will look into that. I don't know if I remember a shorter version of the residential responses, but I will check.
Thank you
Okay.
very much. Thank you.
Very good. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Yes, sir.
I did have my hand raised.
Oh, I'm
Is there
sorry.
any way-
I'm on the phone.
No worries. I'm so sorry. Is there any way the public in general could get access to Ryan's proposal without that creating a lot of confusion? I understand it's just a proposal and it's just a beginning framework, but when he was running through that, it was, I didn't catch it all. And it's kind of something that'd be good to digest.
Ryan, is that okay, Ryan, if you don't object to that, do you?
Is Ryan still here?
I think, hey, Tom, I think Ryan's off the call at this point.
Oh, he failed. Sorry about it, deal. It's certainly okay with me. Who am I talking to? I'm sorry.
This is Phil McDuffie. This is Phil
Oh, hey,
McDuffie.
Phil. I'm sorry. I had to switch my Zoom kicked me off of my computer, and so I just called in.
No
Why
problem.
don't I, if and I'm pretty sure Ryan would not object, but if he doesn't, if there's no objection from Ryan, since it's his work product, we'll send you a copy of it.
Well, I'm wondering if there's a way. That's great. I would love to digest it. I'm wondering if I could see it leading to confusion if it were put out without some caveat, but I was just hoping to get it more out there publicly so that more people might be able to kind of look at it and figure out how it might directly affect them.
Sure. No, and that's fair. That's fair. Let me just, with that caveat, let me work on it and see what we can do, and we'll
Okay,
put
great.
we certainly, and your point is well taken. We certainly need to make sure that it's not, this is a framework to look at rather than a proposal right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would, as long as you put something up top in bold letters to make that very clear. Otherwise, it's
Yeah, I
opening
know.
up a can of worms.
I've lived long enough.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move, we adjourn.
And do we have a second?
Second.
And we have a second. And without objection, we are adjourned. Thank y'all very much. And I
Thank you all.
apologize about, we've got a little technical issues we'll have to deal with.
We'll get
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Dude. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good night.
Bye.